beautiful spring day. I mean, the roses are blooming and the clematis is blooming, and there are baby birds up in the rafters by the garage, and it's just like things are alive. It's spring in the Ozarks. And just the other day, we celebrated International Midwives Day, and it's National Nurses Appreciation Day, and this weekend is Mother's Day. And with all that honoring of birth and life and motherhood and caretaking and beauty of spring, it's really important to talk a lot about the aspects of midwifery and the aspects of mothering that are really beautiful and life-giving. And it's also really important for us to talk about some of the more intense and sad and painful aspects of mothering. And so today we're going to be talking about miscarriage. And why I want to talk about miscarriage right in the midst of all these midwife days and Mother's Day and spring is because the beauty of spring and the life-giving, and it's like hopeful, and it's growth oriented, and it's expansive, and those types of feelings and experiences in our environment, they act as a buffer. So they help us go in and feel the pain of what we're going through as women who miscarry or have miscarried. And at the same time, we can look around and see all the beauty. And a lot of times we don't process what happens to us right away. We process them later. And you might be watching this video at some other point in time and it might not be beautiful spring for you. But for me, as the person that's presenting this, I also appreciate the beauty all around me, and I also appreciate the lineage of nurses and of midwives, of mothers that have gone through this experience, and I want to honor them and honor their struggle and honor their sacrifice and honor their strength right in the time that we are acknowledging them. And I want to just bring this to the conversation too. I also recently asked a bunch of the midwives in Arkansas. I'm in Arkansas, and I asked the group of the Arkansas midwives, what would you like me to make videos about for your midwifery clients? And miscarriage was on the list, right? And so I felt really compelled that right now is the right time to be talking about this. Okay, so if we're just now meeting, this is the first time you're meeting, you're like, who is she? Who is she? That's a great question. I ask myself that all the time. No, but my name is Maria Chaudhry, and I'm a licensed midwife, and I'm an herbalist and the creator of Birthsong Botanicals. In Birthsong Botanicals, we make nourishing herbal remedies for fertility and menstruation, for pregnancy, and for birth, and for postpartum, and for recovery, and for breastfeeding moms, and for their children, and herbs to help keep their family healthy, right? We have blogs, we have YouTube channels, we have podcasts. You can learn all about that on birthsongbotanicals.com. Okay? I want to say before we get really deep into this conversation is that this video, and really all my videos, they're for educational purposes only, right? And they are in no way a replacement for midwifery care. And I really implore and ask of you and really require of you to be safe and to act responsibly and utilize this information to be a tool to help you on your path as you go through your experience, and you go through your experience all the way to wholeness on the other side. Okay? So ready to get started. Oh, also this video is live. I'm in front of the camera. Heaven's behind the camera. If there are comments and questions, I'm not going to see them pop up. But when there's a pause, and if it seems appropriate, Heaven will chime in. But she usually doesn't like to interrupt my flow, which I appreciate because I need to stay focused. Okay, so chime in, comment, ask questions, and leave your aha moments. Okay, so we're about to get started. So when you like find out you're pregnant, you know, when you see the 2 lines on the stick, it is gonna spur, you know, the whole dynamic complexity of emotions, from excitement maybe to sheer panic of like, oh God, right? And for some people, those 2 lines on the stick, it is like they've been wanting that. That is the right time for them. They are excited and overjoyed, and it's been like, it's a desire, it's a dream come true. And then for other women, they're like, oh, whoa, timing way off, person way off. This is not quite the right time, not quite what I wanted. Whoa. So we're all in this together as women. That's why I'm doing this, because we're all in this together as women. And when we're going to talk about these things with motherhood and loss and grief, we're going to do a series of this, right? And so we have to show respect and kindness to all the women, right? To all the women that wanted the pregnancy and the women that didn't, right? So I just want to bring that to the forefront. Okay, so here we are. We're all over the spectrum. There's like confusing feelings, and there's painful feelings when this woman is like, oh my gosh, I had 2 lines on the stick. Either I wanted the baby or I didn't want the baby, but now I'm in the midst of a miscarriage, and now I'm confused, and I'm scared, and I'm overwhelmed, and I don't know what's going on, and I feel it in my body, and I feel it physically, and I feel it emotionally. And so my hope today is to help you remember that you're not alone. I know that statistics, when we hear statistics, that doesn't always make us feel like we're like not alone. We still have our lonely feeling. But I do want to remind you that the studies show that all of the documented pregnancies, the ones that like go through the hospital or go through midwifery care and they document those, 20 to 25% of those pregnancies end in a miscarriage. That's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, right? So it's massive amounts of women that are going through this, right? Even though we feel so alone, we are really in this together. And most of the miscarriages, like 85% of them, are going to happen, or most of the losses are going to happen in the first trimester, from between week 1 and week 12. Okay? And so what I want to talk about today, and the language that I want to use as I talk, is I want to talk about this experience from a place of a professional, and so I'm going to utilize medical language, right? At the same time, I'm going to talk about this from a place as a woman and as a mother, and I'm going to use the language of women, right? And I don't want us to get so caught up in all these definitions, and sometimes you'll find me use like medical terms, and then you'll find me using words that are not medical terms, but they inflict an emotional sensation in you, and that's intentional, so you can oscillate between like the expert and the human, right? Okay. And also, I am going to give you some definitions, but I also don't want us to get caught up in things like definitions. More so, I want to give you tools so that you can, like I said before, that you can navigate through this experience, okay? So, I just want to go right here. Okay, so just before we get started, why is it that some 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 pregnancies don't go to term? And there are so many explanations for this in the medical terminology and in the medical text, and they are honestly over my head and they're over your head. And like I just said, I didn't want us to get bogged down in definitions and things like that. I wanted to just have tools and some simple understandings that we're not alone and how we can get through it. So my answer right here is super simplified. I'm fully aware that there can go much deeper and much more expansive on why pregnancies don't continue, but I'm going to just compare it to a garden really quickly. When you're thinking about planting a seed, you have the soil conditions, right? You don't have dirt. If you just have dirt, it's not going to work, but you have soil. Soil is alive with microbiomes and life and worms and moisture and fungus, all kinds of things are in soil. It's living. It's not dirt. It's living. And then you have the condition of the soil. And then you have the condition of the seed. This seed is not like the seed from 1986 that you just found, right? It's like it has potential in it. So the quality of the seed and the quality of the soil. And then when you plant it, it's the timing of the seed, right? It's the temperature, it's the moisture, it's the placement, it's the sunlight, it's the shade, it's all the other like insects and stuff that came along and ate the seed. I mean, there's all these conditions that have to be perfect. They have to line up just the exact right optimal way, or that little seedling is either not going to grow, or it's going to grow, but it's not going to be strong enough to grow all the way. And so they pass away too soon. And that's the super simplification answer of what happens. Okay, and really, let's start talking about the types of miscarriages. And so the medical terminology for miscarriage is called spontaneous abortion. When we hear the word abortion, we immediately think induced abortion. And so we're going to do a series of talks like this. And today we're going to focus on spontaneous abortion. And from this point on, I'm going to call it a miscarriage. Soon I'll make a video about induced abortion, okay? So we're going to call it, so it's a spontaneous abortion, and we're going to call it a miscarriage. And there are several types of miscarriages. You can have a threatened miscarriage. You can have an inevitable miscarriage. You can have a complete miscarriage. You can have an incomplete miscarriage, or you can have a missed miscarriage. And you can have, I'll go into more. You can have an ectopic, you can have a molar, and you can have a blighted ovum. And this is not written about in the books, but this is my personal experience, so I don't have a technical definition for it, but I'll call it, you can have a spiritual miscarriage, right? So let's go into the definitions of what all those are and kind of give you an idea of what I mean. Okay, so a threatened miscarriage. A threatened miscarriage is, in some ways, it's just you're unsure about what's to unfold. So, in a normal, healthy, everyday, common, healthy pregnant woman's experience in early pregnancy, she might experience some spotting, she might experience some bleeding, or she might experience some cramping. Those in and of themselves they start to go into the term of threatened miscarriage, but the vast majority of those women, like 80% of them, if they have spotting and bleeding only, or they just have cramping, most of those women are going to continue with their pregnancy and they're going to give birth at term, right? It's just when you have spotting and bleeding and cramping together, that's what starts to make this become more threatening, right? The kind of clinical aspect that makes it be a threatened miscarriage is that when you're evaluating the woman, her cervix is still closed. So everything is still closed up and tight, but she's having cramping and bleeding. What do you do? Here you are. You have cramping and bleeding. What do? Well, essentially you have a couple choices. One is you just wait and see, right? Let the process unfold. A threatened miscarriage can last for several days or several weeks before you understand and before you get the big picture of what's about to happen. So waiting and seeing typically requires patience. And either the cramping and the bleeding will resolve and you'll push your baby out, or the cramping and bleeding is just going to get more intense and more severe and you'll push your baby out much sooner than you thought, right? You can ask your midwife to make you a herbal tincture right? And that herbal tincture can be equal parts of cramp bark and wild yam. That's a very safe and gentle remedy that can help with the cramping so that you don't cramp so much. However, if this becomes an inevitable miscarriage, there's nothing that you can do to stop it. It's inevitable. This is the threatened miscarriage is a little tentative place that you are in, this like limbo. So when you're waiting and seeing, you can go on bed rest, right? However, the textbooks say there's no scientific evidence that bed rest helps. However, from my perspective, if you lay down and you stop being out here, always looking out and trying to do something, get your mind off of it. It is good to get your mind off of it, but it's also sometimes it perpetuates denial, and when you lay down, you're a little bit faced with yourself, and it's an opportunity to ask yourself some questions that only you can answer, and there's no judgment, right? You might judge yourself, and actually the culture, and actually the society will judge you. And I'm sorry about that. But ultimately, that's why I want to have this conversation, is to remove a lot of this judgment so that you can find your own truth, right? But your question is, do I want to keep this baby or do I want to let it go? Right? And I'm skipping ahead in my paperwork here, but if you want to keep this baby, you can lay down, and one thought is just like a little visualization is like, lay down, drink some water, take some rest, and put your hands on your heart and hands on your belly, and maybe even look in, I have a great little book, The Miracle of Birth, and look in the book or look online and see all the pictures of those healthy babies, and see them in their little sacs and their little cords, and see that placenta implanted and embedded, and wrap yourself in love and light and see it whole and perfect and claim it. And know that some things might be inevitable whether you want it or not. We don't always get what we want, but at least you are in a place of seeing it and feeling it and claiming it, right? If you want this baby to pass through you, right, so that you're a vessel and that it goes through you, then you do almost the exact same thing, except you place your hands over your heart and over your belly, and you see this baby and you love this baby and you ask for it to go. You let it go without attachment, that it passes through you fully and completely, and it does not linger, right? And only you can answer that question, and only you can do that. So you're in this place. And then there's other things you could do. A couple other things you could do. This is what the textbooks tell you to do. Textbooks tell you go get ultrasound. The ultrasound will not tell you if the baby will live or die. The ultrasound will tell you if there's a heartbeat or not. You can go get an HCG test, and it's a serial test. You can test it on Monday, then test it on Wednesday, and test it on Friday. If your hormone levels are rising at the appropriate amount, then that lets you know, like, okay, you might be, but it can't. Or if your hormone levels are not rising, it will tell you, okay. You can also check your progesterone levels. Those tests will not save your pregnancy. Those tests just kind of let you know what's happening, so you don't have to wait so long to wonder. Okay? All right. Cool. All right, so here we go. So either that thing turns into a full, complete pregnancy, or that thing unfolds, that experience unfolds into a miscarriage. So let's talk about inevitable miscarriage. So, like I just said, inevitable miscarriages can unfold from a threatened miscarriage, or they can kind of come a little bit out of nowhere and a little bit surprise you, right? But an inevitable miscarriage, there's cramping and bleeding. But this time, the cramping and bleeding is more severe. There's more bleeding and there's more cramping, right? Once again, this can happen fairly quickly, or this can linger on. But an inevitable miscarriage, if she's going into having a miscarriage, It also kind of depends on where she is in her pregnancy. Like, is she 6 weeks? Is she 12 weeks? Is she beyond that? But she'll have labor, right? She'll have intense abdominal pains. She'll have labor. And this can go on for hours. She can have like pressure, like the need to, and then the urge to push. And then once the baby comes out, there'll be like like a relief, like, oh, okay, I'm fine. And then there'll be blood, right? And then the bleeding will continue postpartum. So postpartum, because you just gave birth, right? This is just a birth. It just happened earlier in pregnancy. So the symptoms are the same. The feelings are the same. Okay, so I do want to say that I'm going to go back to that, what happens postpartum and how to take care of yourself. So let's talk about the next two, complete or incomplete miscarriages. We want complete miscarriages. If this baby is passing through your body, it is passing through your body all the way. There's nothing lingering, right? We want it to not linger, not retain, not stay. Right? The love can stay, but not the physical stuff in your womb. So the technical definition for that is what we say is that all the contents of conception have emptied out of the uterus. In other words, the baby's out, the placenta's out, the amniotic sac is out, the cord is out, the tissue's out, it's all out. Right? That's the ideal situation. And typically the cramping and bleeding, she will have cramping and bleeding postpartum, but it tends to like resolve fairly quickly without any real physical consequence, right? There's no hemorrhage, there's no signs of infection, the bleeding just kind of resolves. And now, an incomplete miscarriage. An incomplete miscarriage is exactly like it sounds like. Some of the fetal tissue, some of this fragmented stayed retained in your uterus, right? This is actually a pretty big deal, and you need to be evaluated, right? I'm about to give you a couple more definitions, and then we're going to come back into this scene a little bit more. But essentially, if something is retained inside you, then that is a portal for infection, and that is your uterus is trying to cramp down. It's trying to cramp down, and how you stop bleeding is really just pressure. So if you have free bleeder, all these are vessels, right? And if I can cramp down completely, I apply pressure to those vessels, they stop bleeding. But if there's something inside, I'm applying pressure. It's not enough pressure to stop bleeding. And then that's where the hemorrhage comes from. Okay. And then the last type of the last one I'm going to talk about in terms of miscarriage right here is called a missed miscarriage. And so what a missed miscarriage is that you're going through your pregnancy, and then, like, you don't really notice that dramatically that something is different. I mean, maybe when hindsight, or maybe you think about, like, oh, I'm not so nauseous anymore. Oh, wow, I'm not so tired anymore. Oh, but there's nothing that obvious that stands out. You might notice some, like, brown discharge. And for a lot of women, they go through their ultrasounds and they're like, what? There's no heartbeat. Like, they didn't know that. So a missed miscarriage means that your baby died in utero several weeks or months before you actually go into labor. I experienced this, a missed miscarriage. So just in my own little personal story really quickly, in my gestation, I thought I was like 16 weeks pregnant, or I was 16 weeks pregnant. However, and had brown bleeding, and I was like, oh, I really feel like I'm not pregnant anymore, right? When I went into labor, had full-on labor, just like I described, several hours, the whole thing, had a complete miscarriage, saw the baby, saw the sac, saw the whole thing. Very beautiful experience, actually, an intense and raw experience, but everything came out. We named her Sonnet. She was super cute. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that when we opened the sac and saw her, gestationally, when we looked at the book to compare, like, how big is she? She was like 8 or 9 weeks. So she was 8 or 9 weeks developmentally, but I held on to her for 2 more months before I was psychologically, emotionally accepting, or my body or whatever happened, before I was able to let her go, right? And so there, I read about and hear stories about this happening for women. They hold their babies for months and months and months, right? And so once again, I remember asking myself, the dark night of the soul, what do I want? And when I finally was like, oh, I feel like I really realize now that I am not pregnant anymore, or the baby's still inside me, but the baby's not alive, and I'm going to allow her to go. And that's when I went into labor. I'm a little bit of, like, I'm telling all you guys to go to the doctor and go get your ultrasound and go get all those blood tests, but I had a midwife, but I didn't go. I waited and see. I waited and saw, and that was my experience. Okay, so a couple other things, and I want to get back to what's really important. Okay, so these other things, the other types of pregnancy losses, you got your ectopic, your molar, and your blighted ovum. Okay, so an ectopic, I want to talk about this briefly. This means that the egg is fertilized outside of the uterus, right? It can be on the outside of the uterus, or it can be in the fallopian tubes. Most babies don't survive this situation. Most women don't realize they have an ectopic pregnancy until they're like doubled over. They might have pain. This is important. If you have pain in your lower abdomen on one side or on the other side, like near your ovary or in your fallopian tube, almost that you start to feel the pain hits you really strongly, and it's like you feel nauseous, maybe a little shocky, like, whoa, there's something really wrong. And then when the bleeding comes out, there might be some white or pinkish tissue with the bleeding. So if you feel really bad, you have pain on one side or the other, and the bleeding, and there's some white or pinkish tissue, go to the hospital immediately. Okay? Molar pregnancy. Okay, molar pregnancy is a little bit different. So a molar pregnancy is like from the beginning, from the conception, that whole conception moment, something just wasn't right. Like it just didn't develop right? And so it's not like you don't see this baby, you kind of more see this conglomerate of tissue, right? The problem with the molar pregnancy is that they tend to not just pass as like a spontaneous miscarriage, right? These molar pregnancies, they have to be surgically removed, right? So that's kind of a big deal. And then the other one is a blighted ovum. So these blighted ovums, they were conceived, the sac develops, and the baby is conceived, but it doesn't develop, and really the body like absorbs the baby. So it's kind of like an empty sac, right? And so and it gets reabsorbed. And so those are blighted ovums. So I just kind of want to give you some other ideas of what could be happening. But I kind of want to go back to the whole miscarriage thing and what to do afterwards and how to take care of yourself and like the complete and the incomplete miscarriage. Okay, so seeing the baby, seeing what comes out of your body, seeing what passes through you is really important for a few reasons. One, just in terms of grief and managing and dealing with grief. One way that we can kind of come to terms with our grief is seeing what's happened in this physical reality, right? Seeing it, touching it, feeling it, knowing it. That kind of helps you be like, okay, I didn't just make this up. Like a spiritual miscarriage, nothing really to see, right? But there's a physical thing to see, a baby to see, right? And so it's really important for your process to know what happened in reality. Okay, so when women are in this situation, there's a full spectrum of us, right? Some women are eager to look, to see, immediately to see what it is. Some women are a little bit more hesitant, and some women downright refuse to look. I'm here gently and firmly encouraging you and suggesting that you look and see. I've had countless conversations of women on the couch that flushed the baby down the toilet and didn't look, and they're haunted by that, right? That you don't get another opportunity. This is the only time. The moment is right there, and it's the only time you get. So take that opportunity, because later you might regret it. So I'm saying that with love and compassion and firmness to you. If somebody will not look, then have somebody take a picture. Have your partner take a picture, have your midwife take a picture, have somebody take a picture to see what the baby looked like, to see what the tissue looked like, to see what came out, right? It's not only imperative for your grief, but also for your partner's grief, but it also becomes a medical necessity. You need to know what came out of your body to know if it came out complete or if you have retained fragments. If it came out complete, your body's going to recover fine, more than likely. But if there's fragments and it's not complete, you might need to go get a DNC, right? You might need to take some herbs, or you might need to take a pill, or you might need to get a DNC, and that's a much more invasive process, but that's a life-saving process, and you need to know what needs to happen. If you miscarry alone, and your midwife is not with you, and the stuff comes out into the toilet, the baby comes out into the toilet, you or your friend or your partner put a plastic bag on your hand and reach into the toilet and take whatever is out, put it into a glass jar and put it into the refrigerator if you can't look at it. But when your midwife comes, she needs to see. You also keep all your pads. She needs to evaluate how much bleeding you just bled, because bleeding in early pregnancy is vastly different than bleeding at term. Bleeding in early pregnancy loss, a woman has not experienced blood volume expansion. In a normal healthy pregnancy, a woman, as she goes through her pregnancy, the quantity of her blood will double in volume, right? So by the time she's at term, she's at 40 weeks, she has all this extra blood. So when she pushes out her baby and she pushes out her placenta and then pushes out 2 cups of blood, she doesn't miss it at all because she made all this extra. Early pregnancy, there is no extra. You're only used to bleeding the amount of your scant little period. And this is like way more blood than your period. So a woman will feel depleted, drained, and when they bleed too much, they feel depleted, they feel drained, and in an urgent moment, she goes, it's a hemorrhage, she gets shocky, she faints, she's pale, she's pallid, she's incoherent, she can't think well, her blood pressure drops, her pulse is elevated, and it is a big deal, right? And so you need to know how much blood it is, because you need to know if you need blood, or you need to know for the midwife to help you build your blood postpartum, so you can have the blood volume and you can have the oxygen that you need so that you can restore more quickly, because those, not only do these women feel depleted, but then they become more susceptible to an infection, and they become more susceptible to depression, right? And we don't want any of that. So we got to know how much blood you lost, and we got to make sure you don't lose that much blood. If after a miscarriage, even if you didn't hemorrhage, but especially if you hemorrhaged, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll will help oxygenate your blood. It'll help build your iron levels. It will help you get out of that low, depleted, run down state, and kind of bring back your vitality, right? It's essential that after you have a miscarriage, that you have at least 2 midwife visits, that your midwife comes to you right away and checks in and makes sure your scene is okay and that everything is okay. And then later, whatever time, a month later, a couple days later, a couple weeks later, whatever you two decide, but you have a midwife visit later, just to make sure you don't have any pain, any infection, your bleeding is resolved, because she also needs to check your iron levels, and you need to make sure you're not anemic for all the things I just said. And so you can process, because a midwife is a great person to process with, because she knows you're not alone. She herself probably experienced it, or if she hasn't, she has helped so many other women experience it. And even if you had a medical doctor as your doctor, I encourage you to seek out like a midwife or a doula or a counselor or a shaman or a priest or a pastor or whomever for you to talk this through, because from a mental health perspective, women with postpartum experiences from a miscarriage and fetal loss, they are in the same category as outpatient clinically depressed people or people that have PTSD. Like, that's a real thing. It's documented. So it's not like, oh, I need help. Yeah, you do. I mean, and that's what the tribe is there for. That's what your church group is there for. That's what your women's group is there for. That's what your girlfriend is there for. But that's what all these professionals, that's what we're here for too. Okay. We're still in this a little bit. Miscarriages last a long time, so we're still in it. Let's talk about what are the signs and symptoms and a couple things that your midwife would ask. Okay? So, anytime you're pregnant and you see spotting or bleeding, call your midwife up. And then, this is an example of a phone call with your midwife. Let me see if I can remember how I used to be. All right, so you call, and she hears it on your voice right off the bat. You're like, hey! And then you're like, well, that's a little fake, or hey, right? So anyways, the woman's talking, and she's like, I feel like I'm cramping or bleeding. And so the midwife is like immediately like, okay, so tell me more about that. When did it start? Like, so when did it start? How long has it been going on? Okay, so tell me more about this spotting and this bleeding. Like, what color is it? Is it brown? Is it pink? Is it a little watery? Is it bright red? Like, tell me more about the quantity. So, like, is it on the paper when you wipe? Is it like leaving a drop on your underwear? Is it dripping into the toilet? Is it running down your leg? Is it filling a pad? Are you filling a pad? Right? Is there anything other than blood that's come out? And then, like, okay, so what do you feel? Tell me about your abdomen. What are you feeling? Are you feeling cramp? Where are these cramps? Does it feel like you're about to start your period? Is it up high? Okay, is it down low? Does it feel like this? This is an important one. Does it feel like you have pressure on your back? How does your back feel? Does it feel like you're constipated? Like if you could just have a bowel movement, you'd feel a lot better? Do you feel a lot of pressure in your rectum? That right there. That's a pretty big sign right there. And then a couple other questions. Okay, so maybe you don't have pressure in your rectum. Let's just do some more questions. When was the last time you had sex? Like, did you have sex this morning or yesterday? Did you, like, have any event? Like, I don't know, did you get in a car accident? Did you trip? Did the horse kick you? Did you accidentally fall down the stairs? Did the kid jump on you? Did you have some, like, impact? Right? Did you, and then the midwives also, like, remembering, like, so how far along are you again? Like, how many weeks are you? And then also the big question is, what's your blood type? Right? Let's break this down a little bit. Okay. Remember, if there's just cramping or there's just bleeding, probably fine. But there are so many little times that bleeding in early pregnancy is normal. So there's the first type, it's called implantation bleeding, and that happens pretty early in pregnancy. That's like between 7 and 10 days after conception. So that's the implantation bleeding, the placenta implants, and there's some drops of blood. All right? That's normal, right? And then there can be cervical bleeding from like a polyp, because all this progesterone and everything is influencing growth, and these polyps are growing and they can bleed. Also, in early pregnancy, it's super common when you have sex to bleed and it doesn't lead to a miscarriage. It's safe and it's fine. It's startling to both you and your partner, but most of the time it's totally fine. But so sex with bleeding, bleeding with sex, however it goes. And then there is like some women at the time that they would normally have their cycle, they bleed a little bit too, and all those are fine. So either way, anytime you have something like that, call your midwife. You need to know your blood type, because if your blood type is Rh negative, like you're A negative, O negative, B negative, AB negative, then you're going to need a RhoGAM shot if this turns into a miscarriage. This is another reason it's really important to get early pregnancy care, early prenatal care, so you can know this information so you can make good decisions. Okay. I talked about that. So let's just talk a little bit more about blood loss, just to kind of give you and I already talked about blood volume expansion. I just really want to tell you one more thing about blood loss and about like this experience of, like I just said, call your midwife at the first sign of bleeding. But I know from experience, I've helped hundreds of women give birth, so I know for sure, and I've experienced this, not myself, but with other people, of by the time that woman calls you, she's been bleeding for a while. She took her a minute to like wrap her head around what's really happening. She was in denial. She didn't want this to be happening, and now here she is. She's been bleeding for a while. If that's the case, the midwife must get there quickly, or you need to go to the hospital right away. Because I just mentioned to you about blood volume expansion, right? Do not have blood volume expansion. So by the time you've been bleeding for a while, you're already in a state of hemorrhage, right? So I'm telling you this because I don't want you to be alone and bleeding in your bathroom for too long. Okay? So the midwife needs to come over and assess you, and then after everything has passed, after the baby has been born, the midwife could make you a tincture of equal parts of yarrow, of shepherd's purse, and bayberry. Those are all very astringent, and they're all really good. Shepherd's purse will help cramp and... No, I'm not saying that right. I apologize. Shepherd's purse will help coagulate your blood, right? The yarrow will help be an astringent to dry it up so you don't have so much blood. And the yarrow will help cramp down your uterus, and the yarrow will also help prevent an infection. And then bayberry is one of the most astringent herbs. It'll just help dry it up, right? So it'll help you not bleed so much. And so you can do that. These are the things I want to say. This is when you seek medical attention, okay? And start off on the list. If there's bleeding in pregnancy, call your midwife. If you soak 2 pads in half an hour, or you have continuous bleeding, that is a hemorrhage, and you need to get attention immediately. You will go into shock. This is what shock. These are the symptoms of shock. You're going to have a rapid heart rate. You're going to feel sweaty and pale, lightheaded, ringing in your ears, like you might faint, disoriented, like I already said, rapid heart rate. Right? Call 911. A different reason to seek medical attention is after your miscarriage, if you feel like you have signs of an infection. A sign of infection will be unusually smelling discharge. Your discharge is going to, after a miscarriage, is going to smell like your period, but it has a little bit more of this like ripe kind of feel. There's this a little bit more hormone-y smell to it. So, but it doesn't smell foul, right? It doesn't smell infected. It doesn't smell sick or gross, right? So if you have anything like that, you want to seek attention right away. The signs of infection, the first sign of infection is an elevated pulse, so you have to know how to check your pulse, but then an elevated temperature. If you have a temperature of 100.4 and it's a few days, 1 to few days right after a miscarriage, that is a clear sign that you need to get medical attention. Similar things to shock, you might feel faint or dizzy, lightheaded, weak, pale, just discomfort, pain, fevery, all those things. And then the other reason to get attention, maybe not like urgently, but it depends on your situation, but if you like linger in a place of depression, and if you linger in a place of sadness, in a place of anxiety for longer than a few days and a couple weeks, but like you're lingering there in the deep dark place, it's time to get help. Okay? All right, and there was something else I wanted to say. All right. So like I said before, you want to get a couple of visits with the care provider to make sure you don't have any of those things, but then also to process. I want to start to go into the recovery process. Your physical body will recover and bounce back really quickly. As long as you didn't hemorrhage or have a major infection and need to be like get blood and have a DNC. I mean, most people don't have that, but that does exist, right? And that's why we're grateful for medical world and IVs and all that stuff. Generally speaking though, your physical body, if you have a complete miscarriage and it's early on, before you know it, like you're gonna have your period again, like right at the next time you're supposed to have a period, right, in a couple weeks. Your body heals up, but it's your emotions, it's your psychology, it's your spirituality that's forever impacted and influenced and evolved from this experience. So the first set of comfort measures are really like for physical comfort. One is obviously to rest, getting help you need with the household chores, with your other kids, with cooking and cleaning, and not going right back to work. To what we do is, after you have a miscarriage too, the day right after, it's also just like a term birth. Your next day, you feel fine. You're like, whoa, I went through this whole thing and like, wow, I kind of feel all right. Like I thought I would feel way worse than this. So that's your first day. And then your next day, you're like, what? How do I not feel fine now? But you don't feel fine now. So that's really when the rest is. And so you really rely on your help and your support. And your nourishment, right? I'm not going to linger here, but water and your teas and like your comfort foods, your chickpeas and your coconuts and your chocolate and your dark leafy greens and those foods that make you feel comfortable and loved and supported. But it's not the time really for the alcohol. It's not the time for the high sugar and the processed foods and all those dairies and the red meats, because those cause inflammation and they just kind of linger in pain and they don't really fully feed you, and you've been emptied, right? And you need to be filled, right? So your food becomes your medicine. And then let your herbs support you. Let your herbs support you. Like I mentioned, yarrow can help stop with the bleeding, right? The cramp bark can help with your cramps, your postpartum cramps. Red raspberry leaf is nourishing. It's nourishing to your blood and to your bones, and it helps tonify your uterus so you don't bleed so much, and it also helps with your iron levels, right? What else? Motherwort. Motherwort is going to help with your mood, with your feelings, and it's also going to help stop your bleeding. So all those things, that's in cycle relief, right? Or it's also in nurtured mother. Those herbs are in there. But then you also need help from herbs in terms of like hormone balance and mood support. So that's where your adaptogenic herbs come in, right? And so that's going to be in women's balance. You're going to have your nourishing herbs like red raspberry leaf, and your nourishing herbs, nettle, and your lemon balm is an herb that is called the joyful herb to help uplift you, right? So women's balance is going to help you with your hormones and with your mood and with your vitamins and your minerals. And then you're going to maybe have feelings of, like I said, anxiety, right? And if you have anxiety, then soft herbs like the wise herbs like chamomile and catnip and passion flower and valerian, they can help you sleep, they can help you rest, they can help you with the tension and the pain you feel, and that's solid and serene. I do want to say though, if you are depressed, like you are down and you need to be uplifted, solid and serene is not your remedy, because solid and serene relaxes you. It kind of helps you go down when you're amped up, right? Helps you rest and go down. If you're already down, you need a little help getting up. And so I would give you chlorophyll. And chlorophyll helps enliven you, awaken you, energize you, vitalize you, right? And just gives you just enough to give you enough help so then you can help get the call or get the help you need, right? To come to you to help you. Depression is really paralyzing. And and so you sometimes need help. And then other ways that herbs can help you are in terms of baths and steams. So I made several videos. I've made videos about all these herbs and about all these remedies before on the YouTube channel, but I've also made videos about postpartum herb baths, about herb baths, and about yoni steams. These herbs, either soaking in the bath or doing the steam, the yoni steam. The nice thing about herbs is that it helps your physical body, but then it starts to become spiritual too. It starts to become emotional too, right? I made a video called Transforming the Simple to the Sacred. And that's a video that just takes the everyday mundane thing like having a sip of tea or taking a bath, and it turns it into a ceremony. And so the herbs become an aspect of that. And so your postpartum herb bath, you just gave birth, right? I've said this over and over again. You've just gave birth, and now you're tired and you're overwhelmed and confused and angry and frustrated, and your body hurts and your mind hurts and everything hurts, right? And also you're bleeding and you don't want an infection. Everything about this bath, postpartum herb bath, is for that. Everything is about for your physical comfort, your emotional comfort, and to help you not get an infection and to help you stop bleeding. Right? You can soak it in your body. You can do it in the yoni steam. Other herbs, if you're going to make your own, it would be nice to add some lavender for love, and some rose for love, and some sage for some purification, and some yarrow, and maybe some rosemary. Rosemary is going to help you remember, going to help kind of put you back together so you can remember what happened. Okay, so that's one way that herbs can be supportive for you. All right, and so other things that you have to do postpartum is you have to take care of yourself, and you're at home, right? So you have to monitor yourself at home. You have to monitor your vital signs, and you have to, you have to make sure your iron levels are up, and you have to just like really take care of yourself that way, okay? And then for another way for like physical, sometimes you have a lot of abdominal cramps, so a hot pack, a heating pad, a hot compress for your abdomen, and then headaches are really common, so a cool cloth for your face or a cool ice pack for your head can help with your headaches, and then the heat can help with your pain for your abdomen. And then moving on down the list, the next thing is like a lot of questions that people ask, and I kind of get to it really when we're talking about partnership here, but is about sex, right? When can I have sex again, and when can I conceive again? And the literature is kind of all over the place. Some people will say, well, as soon as you want. And then other people will be like, whoa, hold your horses, give them 18 months, right? That's kind of a long time. Definitely the standard answer is abstain from sex until you stop bleeding because you don't want the infection, right? Also, so I don't have a finite amount of time that you should wait, but you should have a few regular normal cycles. And from my perspective, this is just my perspective, see where it lands with you, but there is something to be said about having an experience and a capsule in time and then having another pregnancy. What I'm trying to say is if you have one pregnancy and then another pregnancy right away, they get kind of merged together, and then it's confusing and they're not separated, and then they're not really honored as two separate things. And so if there's enough distance between them that you have these two separate experiences, that's just my opinion. It just feels a little bit like, I don't know, feels right to me. But you'll find your own way. Let's kind of go a little bit deeper, kind of back with this whole bit of like partnership and sexuality and so I have this whole list here, but I have, where I have your partner way on the bottom of the list, and that's kind of the problem. The partner shouldn't really be on the bottom of the list, right? Your partner also experienced a loss. Your partner doesn't know how to communicate the way you communicate, right? And it depends on your situation, right? But what I'm trying to say is I put your partner on the bottom of the list, and I'm one of the ones that's aware of that your partner should be on the top, and I still put him on the bottom, right? Women, we say that culture and society doesn't know how to understand and doesn't really understand what we're going through. But I also just said like 1 in 5 pregnancies or 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. So women have a little bit more of like, oh, she's sad, oh, okay. But when a man had a loss, he's typically not standing around the water cooler at work talking about his miscarriage experience, right? So he doesn't really have the same outlets like you do, and he hasn't been raised or trained to really be fully present with you in this experience, and so it's new to him too. And also it depends on where you are in your pregnancy. Early on in pregnancy, and it's not a criticism, but that pregnancy was like merely a mental concept. It wasn't in his body. He didn't have this physical connection to the baby like you did. He doesn't have the hormones flowing through his body like you do. It's like he's on the outside and he feels grief that something happened, and he doesn't always have the tools or the words to express what happens, and so he'd really like it to just, and now he's trying to take care of you who's in a whole hot mess of grief, and he doesn't really know how to do it, and he'd really like it to just all go away. And he would just like it to all just be done and just move on and move through and get past this, right? So there's that. And then there is this like desire for sex and this desire for closeness. Both of you might have this like really need, like I need you now, so close to me. I am lost in this place of confusion and guilt and shame and all this stuff, and I need you, right? And so they want to be together. But then there's a fear of like, fuck, what if I get pregnant again? Or I'm in the midst of grief. I can't really enjoy having sex, but I need to have sex and I need to be with you. And so there's just like all this like disharmony in their communication and disharmony in their relationship, and there's just a lot of disharmony. And so that's part of the recovery process, is finding a way to honor your partner's grief while you're honoring your own grief, while your partner honors you, and while you communicate, right? That's one of the big challenges of the aftermath. Your partner's going to get over it way quicker than you are, right? And that's just kind of part of the story. All right. So there's that. One thing I wanted to say too, of like, I just talking about the enormity of it all. I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that part. So another part of it is like sharing, right? Sharing your experience with your partner, sharing your experience, talking about your experience with your care provider, with your friends, but with yourself, like journaling, writing, writing a letter to the baby, to the future, to your past self, all those types of things. Those are really important. But here's a challenge that is a challenge for women in early pregnancy, is in their sharing of their pregnancy. A lot of people in your family or in your world might not have known you were pregnant, right? They never saw the belly bump, the cute little baby bump. They didn't see the 2 lines on the stick. They didn't even know you were pregnant. And then, so there's that. Or you just told everybody you were pregnant. Woohoo, on Insta. You got like 500 likes on your Instagram post, right? Everyone's like, oh, girl. And then you go to the co-op or you go wherever you go, and then everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you. And then you're just like, I just lost my baby. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I just lost my baby and had a miscarriage. And you're crying in the bulk department at the co-op. And then, or what happens is your girlfriend is like, oh my God, you just lost your baby. And they start crying. And then you feel like you have to comfort them because they're just hit with the news and you've been kind of processing it for a minute. So like communicating and sharing and navigating about your pregnancy and about your loss becomes kind of tricky in the world of loved ones and friends and community. So I wanted to talk about that. And then a couple more things. And so let's kind of get back down to like you, right? And your process and this whole experience of what to do. And a big part of what to do is, like we did in the very beginning, we created a container of safety, right? And so when you're in grief, it doesn't matter for what reason you're in grief, but a container of safety is meaning that within this container, you are free to think, feel, move, cry, be, express without a filter, without consequence, right? And although a container has an edge, it has a limit, right? And so you don't want to artificially put a limit on you, because then you're just going to hurry up and pretend like it didn't happen, and you're going to hurry up and move on and go on with your life, right? And also you got stuff to do, you got other kids to do, and you got a job, and you got stuff, and then until you have absolutely nothing to do, and you're alone in a quarantine, and then you're like, oh, now I have all this time, and then you start processing your experience. But what I'm trying to say about the container of safety is a little bit of it's hard to find the word, because you don't want to rush yourself through the process. At the same time, a container of safety is not a cocoon of grief. Like, it is something that you move through, and you lean into your pain and into your experience, and you go through to the other side as a new person. And you go to the other side. It is debilitating and depleting and damaging for you and for your partner and for everyone around you if you stay trapped in this container, right? It is a moving through container, moving toward your future, toward your hope, toward your dreams, toward this next thing, right? And when you're in your dark night of the soul and in your pit of like, oh shit, you have to find beauty. You have to stay in this place of like, that you can look around and have gratitude. Gratitude, look, heaven brought flowers, right? Because it's a beautiful full moon, right? Find gratitude. Gratitude for just your, maybe for the pain. Find gratitude. And that joy, the ones that are able to move through the process is because they can find joy and hope, right? And so that's essential. And hopefully people will help you do that, but ultimately it's us that has to find that for ourselves. Okay? And so a way to find gratitude and joy and get support and have a container of safety and have your herbs as allies and all those things is to honor and bless your body, and to have and honor and bless and honor your experience, right? You can have a ceremony. It can be simple as an herb bath, lighting a candle, drinking some tea, shedding some tears, and journaling. It could be a naming ceremony, naming your baby. It could be having a burial. It could be making a fire. It could be sending up lanterns into the sky and balloons into the sky. It can be sending candles down a river. It can be creative, right? It can be planting a garden, plant a butterfly garden so the butterflies and hummingbirds come. It can be making music. It can be whatever it is, right? But it's important to do that, to honor and have a ceremony in a way that feels right for your spirituality and feels right for your wholeness. And then your body, blessing your body, right? Like earlier in this talk, I talked about lay a hand on your heart and a hand on your womb and decide, am I going to hold you or am I going to hold you in love as you move through, right? I just want to remind you that, like, you are not broken, right? You did not fail, and you are actually beautiful. Your body is fully capable, right? But yet we need to we need affirmation, we need to remember. That's why we need partners, that's why we need people to remind us, because we forget, we get lost, right? And so you anchor yourself, and you bless your body. And I want you to feel that you are those things whole and complete. And so I made you a meditation. I made a meditation for you. It's called the Pelvic Bowl and Body Blessing. And there's a link to it down below. And you can listen to that. And you can feel blessed and loved. And you can bless your body. And you can get a massage, you know. Those are ways to bless your body through meditation. But other ways you can bless your body is through movement, is through stretching, is through walking or swimming, or I like to practice Tai Chi and Qigong. Those types of movements, they're healthy, they're life-giving, they improve your circulation, and they bring you up, right? And they anchor you and root you in the present reality, and they help you move through in a way that's not just trying to get it done, but they move through in a way that's fully present, conscious, and a full experience. I guess I'm going to start to wrap this up, and I want you to know a few things. These words were coming to me. I've been playing with some words lately. I tend to like words. And I want to say that, you know, in some ways, a miscarriage, you're like, the culture doesn't understand. And I even when I remember thinking somebody had a miscarriage, and I was like thinking like, whoa, she's kind of making this kind of a big deal. I legit honestly thought, I think that's why I had my experience, so I wouldn't think this in. It's like, okay, that's why we have some experiences so we learn. But I honestly thought like, whoa, like your period, you're not even into that guy anyways, and nothing about your life is going like you should be having a baby, and this is what you're saying. I'm not judging you, but this is what you're saying. Now you're all bent out of shape. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why. I'd be like, woo, 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 that's over. But that wasn't this woman's case, and so I was really confused. And so then I had my experience, and I was like, oh, this is a period. This is labor and birth. Like, whoa, this is kind of a big deal. And but in some ways, labor and that it's easier, because it's not easier, but it's different. In labor and birth, like a term baby, you push a baby out and you have this like prize, right? This thing, this living baby, and then like nurse the baby. And that's like hormone flood is just like oxytocin, boom. And when you're not when you don't get to nurse your baby, you don't have that oxytocin flood. And so what you feel like is a hole, like something's missing. So you feel like you have a hole, right? And what I want you to experience, I'm looking at my list because I wrote this down. I felt like it was really important. It's like, so you feel like and have a hole, but it takes a while, right, for you then to feel again, to feel full and whole. And it's my hope for you that one day when you look back on the experience, that you see that the whole experience was holy, that it was sacred and holy, right? So yeah, those, I wanted to leave you with that this experience goes from a whole to holy. And I want you to know, if you've had a miscarriage, or you're taking care of someone that's had a miscarriage, or whatever, I want you to know that that you're loved, and that it's normal to feel what you're feeling, that there are tools, that there is support for you, and that you're not alone, and that also these intense feelings will pass. They'll spring back up again, right? They'll spring back up again, but they'll pass, and the intensity will start to become your new person, the new person. And I want you to have the courage, because it takes courage to reach out and get support. And I say this again, I want you to take your time to go through the experience completely. At the same time, don't linger there too long. Go through your experience. Come out the other side. And you will. I know you will. Right? That's what happens. That's part of the process. You will. So I hope that this video helps you. I'm also going to extend an invitation to you, because I talked about blessing. I extend the invitation to listen to that meditation. I extend the invitation for the herbs. I extend the invitation, if you'd like to join me and do some Qigong. There's so many healing movements that we do in our practice, and I teach it live every week. It's on Zoom. The link is down below. You can stop in one time or 100 times. That's up to you. You don't have to know a single thing. It's probably best if you don't. You just follow along and feel good and just, go about your day. And so there's a link to that below. I teach it every Friday mornings at 10 o'clock Central Time. And I also ask that if this video was important to you and touched you in some way, to please share it with your friends, share it with the women that you know in your community. And I'm building this channel, so I'd like you to like it and subscribe to it and comment and share with me about your experience, or share with me about what seems to help you the most. And yeah, so I'm wrapping my arms around you and loving you and kissing your neck. And until next time, my friends, drink deep and walk in beauty.